This is a short tutorial video on attempting to figure out what type of or what horsepower motor you have. Sometimes there are some older elevators out there basically that you just don't have that information. Sometimes you run into situations where motors are missing the motor data tags. There's just not, or they've been painted over, or there's simply not anything on the tag at all. So truly this is a short little video on how we determine motor horsepower, which is designed to kind of help you out in the field, or if you are actually working, as a sales professional in the industry, elevator industry, on how to kind of do that. So as long as you have two of the parameters, you can usually kind of work backwards in attempting to figure out exactly or come pretty close to what the horsepower is. Now, typically, this information can be obtained through the local jurisdiction who probably has the permit on file. So if that information is on file, that's always the best route to go. It's going to give you your horsepower. It's going to be give you your speed and your capacity. Typically, that'll be on file. If for some reason that's not on file, you're going to have to use a device such as the unit out there that will actually measure the car speed by putting it inside the elevator itself, or attacking the motor to do those kind of calculations. But ultimately, if you've got the speed of the car and the pounds, it's a real easy equation, and basically it's capacity times speed divided by velocity, which is 33,000. That's a constant that'll give you an approximate horsepower based on a typically counterweighted elevator and or a hydro elevator at the same time. Now, when you're trying to figure this out, basically what you're going to do, it's easy enough to set up a spreadsheet here if you're looking at this online, and say you had the capacity, which is, I don't know, so we had 2,500 pounds, and say we figured the elevator speed was 50 feet per minute. You're looking at a motor that's roughly around 3.78 horsepower. You'd round that up probably up to 5, maybe 7.5. Now, as you go up, kind of have that same coefficient of 18 or 20 horsepower, stuff like that. So that's basically gonna give you that kind of information. RPM, unfortunately, really doesn't play into this equation whatsoever, but when you are trying to determine a new motor, and if you tack the old motor at where it's at, you're going to want to have to, kind of sync that up. So we got a job site. It's say it's 10,000 pounds capacity. We tacked the speed of the car out at 150, and you're looking at about a 45 horsepower motor, which is really not too common. You'd up that to 50 horsepower, and you'd be in pretty good shape. So hopefully this has helped you out in trying to figure out the best way of determining horsepower if you don't have the motor data plate on site. If you do run into a situation where the elevator, you've got an old elevator out there and it's just not lifting the full load of that it's rated at, there's a good chance that perhaps the motor or the elevator has been basically maybe incorrectly noted in terms of the capacity, in which case if you can confirm the speed and the horsepower, you can kind of work backwards and figure out as well where that the pound should be. So we run into quite a few applications like this because we have so many old elevator controllers out there that a lot of times we have clients who or customers that the elevator is not lifting the full load on a full load test, and they come back to us and say, hey, if it's an older elevator, this is not working. Also, if you have situations or jobs where you're having an issue with the elevator not lifting the full load on the full load test, there's a good chance, go back and find out if the elevator ever did lift that full load, working backwards, so that at the very least you can determine, yes, it did pass or whatever, and then find out if it's a motor issue or not. So remember never to undersize a motor, never under RPM it or over RPM it, I guess I should say. Sometimes we are able to comply with meeting a specific speed by lowering RPMs. Typical motors that you'll see in the elevator industry are about 1,200 RPMs, but they're actually running at 1080 for single speed units. If you never really want to go too much higher than that on a typical motor. And as always, it's a good idea to contact the company that is either providing your machine if it's a newer application, or even get the assistance of the technical support people over at Hollister Whitney that can usually help you out in terms of trying to determine horsepower and whatnot, because they do that all the time. So and they can also make recommendations. So, but it does critically depend on the capacity and the speed in order to determine that horsepower. So and that's typical for a VVF application. If you're dealing with older 2-speed motors and controllers for those devices, same kind of situation applies there. And just remember that this formula is for the top speed of the elevator and the horsepower. We're really not dealing too much with the secondary speed or the lower windings. And so hopefully that helps you out. Again, if you have any questions, please send us an email at sales@cjanderson.com or give us a call at 800-252-1910. Remember, this is just a guide. It's not perfect, but it does give you some good insight on how to determine what the horsepower of a motor is when you're missing the data tags. So hopefully this helps you out, and if you have any questions, just let us know.